Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Talking Crap Podcast. I'm your host, of course, Lucas Jackson, joined by J. Josh Porter. And we've got a bit of a double bubble today. As we're discussing modern tag team wrestling, it felt only right to do the right thing to invite a modern tag team onto the show.
Makes sense, does it not?
Indeed, so you're getting a 2-for-1 this week. Yeah, you get 2-for-1 this week, and we are going to be featuring a top DKW tag team, the Brotherhood. So without further ado, let's please welcome them to the Talking Crap world. Okay, so we're joined by the Brotherhood, our guests, and we're discussing modern-day tag team wrestling. Please check out our previous episode on Attitude Era tag team wrestling. But today is more about the modern-day tag team wrestling. That's why we brought you guys on. So we're going to start with a simple one. We're going to start with basically tag team inspiration. So for modern-day kind of tag team with yourself, like obviously when I was coming into the business, obviously what would inspire me would be very different from obviously what would inspire you. But from younger guys, like who, from a tag team perspective anyway, would you say inspired you? Starting with you, Harry.
Well, I mean, for me personally, the main reason I wanted to go into being a tag team was when I was getting into wrestling, like for the most recent time, when I was actually about to start training, is when the Usos and the New Day were feuding, and they were literally every month, best match on the pay-per-view, best match on SmackDown. They was consistent, and they were just enjoyable to watch. And there was something about the dynamic of sort of watching there's more stories you can tell, in my opinion, when you've got two people there, because you can show a bond. So that, and then obviously if we go back to obviously things that probably everyone says, the likes of the Hardy Boys, people like that. But yeah, that's what I think. What about you, Charlie, mate?
For me, in WWE, it's pretty much the same as Harry. Like watching guys like the Uso and New Day, and that whole feud was just set tag team wrestling in WWE on fire. That literally defined tag team wrestling in WWE for so long.
Mainly because they were the only tag teams in WWE at the time.
But when I went into wrestling, I watched like a lot of independents. So guys like Aussie Open and CCK sort of inspired me into tag team wrestling.
Yeah, I think definitely over the last few years, it's been like obviously an upward trend with tag team wrestling. And obviously, next kind of question, like, what's different now then from maybe tag teams? I don't know if I guess you probably had a chance to see at least tag team matches from the last 10, 15 years or so. But what do you think is different, or what is unique about tag team wrestling nowadays? Obviously, pandemic aside.
I mean, for me, if I'm picking what is the most unique thing now compared to then, is I just feel like it's the opportunities. If you look at AEW specifically, they have a huge emphasis on tag team wrestling. Like WWE, less so. But if you go for the independents, you look at especially AEW, that's the main one. They put so much focus on it, and it feels like a big deal. If you watch it, it feels like that they're not just another part of the show just to have another different type of match. Let's throw a tag match on. It feels like an important thing, if you know what I mean. Whereas in WWE, I feel like it's an afterthought, or they've just thrown two people together just to sort of build a singles feud. So I feel like that's the main difference for me nowadays. If you look outside of WWE, I feel like it's the emphasis that's actually on it.
Charlie?
For me, it's sort of like the dynamic as well. Was in the 80s, tag team wrestling was a lot slower, and it wasn't seen as something that can main event a show. Well, now you can have tag team matches and being the main event, the main attraction to a show. And like Harry said, there's so much more shown off now than what they was, and there's such a bigger deal and buzz around tag team wrestling than what they used to be.
And there's many more tag teams now, I think, in this current phase than there was probably in any phase since the 80s, probably, I'd say. In the 80s always seemed like the peak of tag team wrestling. But I don't know, like, are we now going to see a new peak? I've asked the question a few times now, and I've got mixed answers to this. But do you think we're going to see a new peak of tag team wrestling?
It depends where you ask. I mean, if you're looking at drop kicks, absolutely not. I mean, let's be honest. We've got me and Charlie, and we've got the Rebellion, and there's no one else there. Unfortunately, as much as I'd love to say, yeah, you look at drop kicks, you're not going to see it. That's why I want to make sure that I can branch out to obviously face other teams. But also, hopefully, it gets to a point where me and Charlie are big enough that we can have names coming in to face us. But if you're talking mainstream, which obviously I'm assuming you are, then 100%. AEW right now is setting basically what to go by. And I'm not being funny. There's no way, especially with NXT, because they're kind of matching them. They're not going to just sit by and just let AEW just go all over the top of them. They will 100% become more mainstream, I believe. 100%.
Obviously, NXT has stuff like the Dusty Tag Classic, and obviously,
which is currently going on.
Currently, well, by the time this goes out, it won't be. There'll be winners.
As of time of this recording, it's going on.
Yeah. Obviously, NXT has a Dusty Road Tag Classic, and obviously they have just put a load of tag team together for the most part. But there are a few, I think, NXT, like Imperium. You've got obviously Undisputed Era. Lucha House Party have been going down there as well. But yeah, Charlie, same question. Like, do you think we're in a new peak?
I generally believe right now, especially with, like Harry said, AEW, NXT, there's going to be a massive peak in tag team wrestling because there's so much unique talent going on in it. Guys like the Young Bucks in AEW, even FTR in AEW, but then guys like Breezango in NXT, who obviously didn't really work as singles wrestlers in WWE, but when put in a tag team, this is probably one of my favourite things to watch in NXT right now. And the fact that there's so many up-and-coming tag teams as well as ones who are already setting the bar every single day, much like the Usos and the New Day, it's just going to peak very high soon. And I feel like a lot of people will be really interested in tag team wrestling more than they already are.
But I just sorry. I just don't like the fact personally that I feel like with the Dusty Classic, it's just tag teams are thrown together. In AEW, they did the same thing. They did this women's tag team tournament, and I'd literally never heard of any of the teams before. And that wasn't just because of I haven't been watching the Independents or something. I've literally not heard of them. They're just thrown together. And with the women's Dusty Classic, there's no women tag teams. So why are they making that? I feel like it almost belittles it. It takes away from the development of tag team wrestling if you're just throwing random people together. Because in my opinion, if you're saying this is the Dusty Cup, this is something that people really want to win, but no one is actually coming together as a tag team. Obviously, you've got the Undisputed Era, Imperium, things like that. But then you just got random teams thrown together. I feel like, personally, if you don't have the teams to do it, don't put it on. And at the end of the day, like they did with the Cruiserweight Classic, like years ago now, why can't you just go out into the independents, hire a couple of tag teams just for occasional matches in this tournament, see how they react, and actually use real tag teams rather than just two random singles guys just thrown together? That's what I don't like, personally.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of thought process with it, with WWE at least, how they see tag teams is they only see WWE basically they use the wrestling to sell merchandise, and end of the day, two wrestlers will sell more merchandise than one wrestler, and so they're a case of like if we have a faction like the Shield, then we're only ever going to sell the Shield merchandise. If we split them all up, we're going to sell Seth Rollins merchandise, Roman Reigns merchandise, and Dean Ambrose merchandise, and that's more money. It's down to money. You mentioned women's stuff in this, so this is one of the points we're going to go on to. So we may as well going to come into it now because I think it's very important that obviously we understand that women are in some of the areas of wrestling are kind of excelling with it, but tag team wrestling is not one of them in the nicest possible way. No, not being sexist here. It's just but. Can the women find, their Dudley Boys, Young Bucks, Heart Foundation, can they? I mean, in the same way they found ways to be creative in Money in the Bank matches, to be creative with obviously Hell in a Cell. Is it just a matter of time, perhaps? Do you reckon?
I mean, I think it depends on a lot of things. If the women, obviously, you've got to understand one thing. The main thing is that there's less women wrestlers in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So obviously, it's going to be hard. But they have the ability, 100%. That's on that. But I feel like most women's wrestlers, as most men wrestlers, I mean, any wrestler you speak to, most people want to become top singles wrestler. Who's at the top of the card? Singles wrestler. And everyone wants to be at the top, let's be honest. So I feel like it's a hard one. I mean, you look at certain teams, they had like the Iconics. That was an actual team that were brilliant, and for some reason they got split up. I cannot comprehend that in my head at all, because they said they wanted to be like singles wrestlers and then come back together afterwards. But at the same time, they had something that was working that the company did not have. So why would you want to split up? Because now, even when you come back together as a team, there's no other teams. You look at the women's teams, right? And can you seriously name one team that isn't just two singles wrestlers thrown together? Like, that's how I see it. And I genuinely think there's the ability there, but nobody's doing it. And I think if people, from a business standpoint, right, if you took two women, right, incredible athletes, and they just tapped into the fact that they're incredible athletes, had charisma, and just consistently worked together, then I think literally that alone would be enough to not only inspire other people to do it, but to give people a reason to want to be women's tag wrestlers, because they've got people to aim to face. You look about me and Charlie, right? If we get to the big time, right, if this happens, we're going to want to face people like the Young Bucks or whoever's around at that point, the Usos, whoever is around at the top at that point, right? Who do women tag teams have to aim for? Charlotte, random singles wrestlers thrown together is pointless. All you need is two people, in my opinion, to actually stay as a team and establish what you can do as that. And then other people will realise the benefits of doing it. That's what I think personally.
Well, yeah, I mean, Charlie, what do you think of this? I think like a few years ago, not a few years ago, even like a year ago, look, they had Fire and Desire, Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. They had Iconics. The Riot Squad's still about. Weirdly, with some of the stuff you mentioned, they split up Iconics and then just put Peyton Royce in a tag team with Lacey Evans.
Exactly.
It's just like, why would you do that? But yeah, Charlie, thoughts on women's tag team wrestling?
I mean, when like the women's tag team belts were first announced in WWE, it was hot. There were so many actual tag teams of women wrestlers at that time. Like obviously at WrestleMania when they was first, I think it was a fatal 4-way for the belts. And there were so many, but since then, like you've mentioned, Fire and Desire got split up. The Riot Squad was split up. Obviously, they're back together now. Loads and loads of the women's tag teams got split up, and now it's just like Harry said, two random singles wrestlers thrown together because there's not enough. The only tag team I can generally name off the top of my head in WWE who have not are actually two tag team wrestlers is the Riot Squad. Apart from that, their main champs as well are Charlotte and Asuka. Obviously, Asuka's Raw Women's Champion as well, and Charlotte's got that feud going on with Lacey and her dad. And it's like why they are meant to be tag team wrestlers, they've got singles feuds going on as well, and that just sort of takes away the objective and the trophy that is meant to be the women's tag titles. It sort of makes them lose their purpose.
What's interesting, obviously, you guys are very young, so you're not remember this. Well, two of these things, well, definitely not one of them. You might remember one of them. But this is the kind of the third go around for this as well, because they had tag belts in the 80s, WWF, and they were really popular. Like they got a couple of good tag teams, and then again they did a thing when kind of what Harry touched upon, like when those tag teams left the territories, they got rid of the belts because they had no women's tag teams. But then Josh, you're the TNA expert here. What was it, TNA? They had Impact tag belts, didn't they? Back in 2000?
Yeah. So I think 2013 roughly was when they got rid of the Knockouts belts.
Okay.
And then they brought them back this year. Well, last year. But yeah, TNA was the first real place for women's wrestling anyway. It was the most popular place for women's wrestling because they had the Knockouts division. But then a little while after the Knockouts division, they brought in the Knockouts tag team division. And you had Knockouts tag teams. You had plenty of women's tag teams. Then you had TNT, the Beautiful People, a few others that I can't remember the name of. But my biggest issue with that whole thing was the reason they got rid of them was because they realised that they killed it by accident. And the way they did that is they let a man team with a woman to win the women's championship belts. The women's tag team.
Man being Eric Young as well.
ODB and Eric Young won the TNA Knockouts tag team titles, and that killed the Knockouts tag division off right.
But here's a question that I've got, right?
Go on. If
a woman wins a man's title, right? So you look at Tessa Blanchard, right, in Impact. Mm-hmm. She wins the main title, right? That's not seen as killing the division, right?
I think it did personally.
And wins a tag title, that's seen as killing the division. Could you not see it as the same thing? Because obviously we want equality in this world, right? Women and men are equal. So if a woman can challenge for a man's title, why can't a man challenge for a woman's title?
I think it's unfair from an advantage perspective. I'd also argue that obviously, as when a woman wins a man's belt, they usually win a belt which obviously been around for a long time and has had history of being won by men, and it's a kind of a gimme kind of thing. Like when Jacqueline won the cruiserweight belt in like 2004, when there's been female 7 champions. But I think when a man, I think because when they always introduce these titles, you got to remember that they are like the first they do, like, the knockout tag titles, the first women's tag belts in 20 years. So imagine if you're a female wrestler or you're a young girl growing up and then tag belts get introduced and then you turn on the television and a man wins it. You're like, what? It was same outrage when like Ellsworth did the Money in the Bank thing. It's like, you've literally waited 15 years to do this match and then you have a man win it. I think while you can do those things, I think it's the fact is it's been shoveled against women for so long. That's why people get obviously a bit more irate with it. Last thing about women's tag belts, we are going to talk obviously male tag team, but one thing you mentioned, a tag team who you need like one tag team to kind of look up to. Here's what I think. I think the one tag team they need to get back for a 6-month or a year run, and this is going to be a bit controversial, the Bella Twins.
Yes.
The Bella Twins.
No.
They've got a TV show. They're adored by millions of girls around the world. Mm-hmm. Put them in there, 6 months, 12. You don't have to be every week on Raw or whatever, because obviously they are a bit past it in the ring wise. But quick kind of 3-month run with the tag belts, re-establish the division, because that's what happened back in 2015. You needed Nikki Bella and Charlotte Flair, like to bring in the Charlotte Flairs and the Becky Lynches and all that kind of stuff. Do it again with the tag belts. Because they were attacking people, I think, would be like, we want to be like them. And yes, obviously, you move it on. Don't keep bringing them back and stuff. Don't give them like 10 reigns of it. But a nice, quick 3-month run, and then have them lose to someone like the Riot Squad. That established the Riot Squad as now we're the tag team. But I think everything needs that tag team.
The Bennettons in like females wrestling as well are sort of seen as like a John Cena and Randy Orton. And if you're talking about women's wrestling, that's one of the first names that get brought up. Yeah, definitely. So obviously bringing them back, sort of like I said, when the women's titles were first announced, it will give that sort of importance back. And it will just sort of,
Let's do. But right, it's coming now to you, Porto Eds. It's time for the Pipebomb promo challenge.
Yes.
Now, you guys.
I think Harry and Charlie are the only people that have been on the podcast for either Gorilla Press or Viewpoint that haven't competed in the Viewpoint yet. That haven't competed in the Pipebomb promo challenge yet.
I'm excited.
So now, you need to pick someone. Pick one of you two. Or should we do it by random? Should we do a coin toss?
Did we not say that they were both doing it?
I personally think we should.
But who's going to go first?
I'm going to be gutted because I saw Joe Lando's one and it was beautiful. It was.
Right, who wants to go first out of you two?
I think Harry's got to go first, Mr. Promo.
Oh, no.
Be Harry.
Last, isn't it? Go on.
Let's do it. Let's do a coin toss.
Let's do a coin toss.
Coin toss.
Right. So let's say Hedge is Charlie and Tails is Harry.
Right.
And it is Tails. I'm going to say that, but it is Tails.
Close enough. It's a Euro. We don't know what one's heads and what one's tails. We're guessing.
Heads the building.
Right. So the rules are simple. You get 1 minute to give us a promo based on topics that I'm going to give you. I'm both going to give you the same topic because it's going to be a tag match. It makes sense. And you'll get scored out of 10. 5 points by me. 5 points by me and 5 points by Lucas. Charlie, I believe you're on team Lucas, and Harry, I believe you're on my team for this. Because although
Lucas got the short straw.
Come on, darling. Don't be autistic.
You're competing together, you're also competing against each other because that's the only way we can make the teams even.
Mm-hmm. That's not even. But we'll carry on.
Right.
Lucas is yeah, go on. Let's do this.
Charlie, you're going first. So your topics are: you're at DKW Demolition, facing the returning Rebellion for the currently vacant DKW Tag Team Championships. You can say whatever you want, pretty much, and your 1 minute to give us a promo starts now.
So, since day one here in DKW, the main guys have always been the Rebellion, Jack Torino and Taylor Essex. Whether that's been the British champions or the tag team titles, it's always been around their waist. Even the trainers here, even the guys that trained me are them two. But since then, 2 new people have arrived, and that's the Brotherhood. And now we want to come forward and we can show that the youth in Dropkicks Wrestling is the best they have to offer. And that is going to be me and Harry. So when Demolition's back and we can wrestle, currently them tag team titles are vacant, meaning Rebellion, it's our time to shine against you two now. Me and Harry want that match for the titles. What you man saying?
Ooh, 12
So that's
seconds.
the best. Ooh, 12 seconds short?
Yeah, not far off though.
Ooh.
Like that's pretty close. I don't think Lucas realizes he's muted.
Even though we had back far, and he just thought, "Fuck that."
That's exactly it. Exactly it.
Oh.
What I was saying. So we'll score Charlie now, and then we'll continue the podcast, and we'll surprise Harry later on with it, so that he is not.
In all honesty,
be
I
out
think
of
I
the
should get I think I should get extra points because I actually speak fluent English that whole promo.
Exactly. He
This
did.
is
He did.
true.
He did.
This is true.
Yeah, no, it was quite cool because you went under, which everyone's going under, it seems, recently. We're going through a little streak of that. But yeah, I'm going to score 4. I know Porter's very harsh, for the time lapse, but I will. Yeah, I'll say 4. You're quite confident. You spoke English at least, so yeah, 4 for me.
Yeah, I'm getting better.
I've got to say, just quickly before you rank this, right? Please bear in mind that Charlie cannot speak English, and he's managed to string his words together and actually end a promo. But not only should you rank him fairly, but also I reckon bump him up a little bit because he's actually managed to make.
Imagine a promo without Harry helping me. That says everything.
To be fair, I think that's the only promo I've seen you do on your own anyway. Like, ever.
Yeah, that is the only promo I've ever done.
Because it's normally a Brotherhood promo.
One in your garden.
And Demolition, you had your own talk show.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I literally promo on Make You on Demolition.
I literally filmed that, helped edit it, and did commentary for it. How did I not remember?
That you forgot about all of that, mate.
Right, anyway, moving on. To be fair, that was one of your better promos that I've seen, so I'm going to have to go. I'm going to be nice this time.
Oh.
Because it was less than 15 seconds under, I'm going to go with a 4.5.
Oh, so that puts Charlie
Taking that, I'm taking
Yeah.
8.5.
Yeah.
Cool.
8.5.
Okay, well, we're going to surprise Harry when it's his turn to go a bit later. So we'll continue our kind of discussion about the modern tag team wrestling. Don't forget, people, to check out our last episode about tag team wrestling, about back on the Naughty. We're now talking about modern tag team wrestling. So we're going to move on to something about, we've touched upon it, so thrown together tag teams. Do they work? Because there's been some successful ones in the past kind of 10 years. Or there's been ones that have ended up, like we've mentioned about Bizango, were 2 singles guys, kind of didn't do too well, ended up being a tag team. Do they work? Let's go around the room. Harry.
Here's what I have to say about this. If their plan is to keep them as a team, fair enough. If there's 2 singles guys that aren't working as a singles guy, put them together, and if you're going to keep them as a team, it works. You look at Cesaro and Tyson Kidd, worked. Cesaro, again, with Sheamus. Even though they're 2 kind of singles guys, they worked as a team. They're thrown together, but they still stuck as a team for a long period of time.
Yeah.
If you're going to just literally put them together for one match, please no. Let's be honest. We all know the tag team titles ones right now, Charlotte and Asuka. The only reason that they're together is to probably set up another match between them. Like, I don't think you have to be a genius to realize that. Even Charlie sitting here right now can understand.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like I said earlier, they've got 2 single feuds going on themselves as well. So more than likely,
that's what I mean. I'm not being funny, right? At the end of the day, the reason I got into a tag team with Charlie, I've touched this before, but the reason I got into a team with Charlie is because in Dropkicks there is no tag teams, so it's something that I wanted to do to establish that division, and also
he needed someone to make him look good.
And also because it's the only way he'll get a title.
He's a former Chaos champion, I'll have you know.
What, yeah.
Under 24/7 rules.
I am.
Wait, but
right, yeah. So thrown together tag teams, Charlie. Do they work?
in a way, yes. I do believe that some tag teams thrown together can actually help because it can benefit the 2 different wrestlers. Like as you mentioned before, Breezango, they didn't have any shine or any like fire underneath them as a single wrestler. They come together and it's all they're known for. Breezango. And obviously they recently, I'm not sure if they still are, but they recently have had the NXT tag team titles. I generally believe that when a team is sort of thrown together, same with factions, much like in TNA, Ace and Eights, that was sort of thrown together of a bunch of singles wrestlers. That's probably the most memorable faction in TNA history.
Well,
So
I mean,
sometimes
Mafia. It depends
I
on
mean,
if you're a
most
TNA fan or if you're just a wrestling fan.
We made them at Matthew. They were singles.
By talking about TNA,
Yeah.
that's why you talking about TNA has made Josh's night. He's like, someone else. No.
Someone else knows TNA. It's amazing. But generally, I feel like obviously, you've got your odd thing where it just doesn't work. Like, I feel like the main one right now is Oscar and Charlotte. I feel like that does not work whatsoever, them 2 together. As singles wrestlers, they're arguably the 2 best women wrestlers in WWE. But together as a tag team, it sort of eliminates that point. It doesn't make them that interesting. But generally, sometimes it just works. It can be the most random thing. Like, obviously, me and Harry, like a month before me and Harry debuted, I was meant to be having a singles match on that exact show.
Indeed.
And then within a month, it changed to me and Harry debut. It was literally thrown together at the near enough the last minute, but now it works.
Basically, what Lucas realised when he was booking Dropkicks is that Charlie has 0 charisma. So then he put him with someone that actually knows what he's doing. And then I realised, actually, shit, I can't wrestle to save my life.
Someone who can wrestle.
Send him a little Snapchat. I was like, Charlie, do you fancy taking the heat in every other part of the match? And I just, yeah, you know what? All right, you can cut my promos for me, and that's how it worked, mate.
Yeah, that was literally the deal with Shock. I was like, I'll take every single heat in every single match we have, but you have to cut every single promo. And we sort of like, yep, sweet, that works.
Well, a lot of tag teams like that though. You have like the talker and you have the wrestler. You know, you have the big guy, the little guy. Like I think if you complement one another, that's fine. Like in terms of DKW, like it's a case of like, you know, it's just getting people to be focused on being a tag team. Like we'll speak a bit briefly about DKW tag teams as well while we're here. But from my perspective, it's always been like I put people together, and as a booker, I notice that people just want to split up. The minute you put them in a tag team is the way to drive them out of a promotion, it seems. And you know, the only guys apart from yourselves that I put together and they've stuck together is obviously Rebellion. You know, people who've gone right. We really want to be a tag team. But I think that's the key thing. I think if you put people together at random just to kind of have a match, that's fine. But then when it gets to like, oh, do you actually really want to be in a tag team? You got to find those people. So obviously DKW, when obviously things come back, like, you know, we spoke obviously privately about this kind of stuff anyway. But obviously we are hoping to build that tag division, but it will obviously take time. But you guys was being at the forefront of that. I think it's quite cool. But from DKW,
belts then.
We'll see. I mean, in
Brooks
terms of
belts.
DKW,
The only belt I'm ever going to get is this Gucci one, so I may as well.
Harry had that on the time.
he's the Gucci champion. But yeah,
Literally, he's got the Gucci shirt as well.
Exactly. I've got a coordinate, that's it, my drip, innit? Like, you can't just brands.
Now you've said the name, I have to censor it.
More work for Josh.
all right, tags and DKW. Start with you, Harry. What are your kind of thoughts? What are your hopes when things do come back to normal?
So the thing is, right, every single tag team, I'm saying this whilst I'm looking like an absolute bellend, but let's be honest, right? Anyway, so tag teams in Dropkicks have been successful. You look at the Rebellion, right? They've gone out into serious, like, you put them two together, right? Was that your idea?
Ish. Obviously, they were stable, the Rebellion, at first. They were stable at first, including Damien and another guy called Crowley. And then they decided, like, they didn't need the other guy. And then Damien, obviously, is kind of every now and again. So obviously they stayed together. But yeah, it was my idea to put them together as a stable. Yeah. They stayed together as a tag team.
Okay, right. But you look at the Rebellion, right? They've been going on to serious success. I genuinely believe this when I say this, right? That Jack Torino and Taylor James could seriously be some of the biggest stars to come out of the UK scene in the coming years. Obviously, like right now, it's a pandemic and stuff, but seriously, I believe that they are two of the most talented people I've met in my life, right? So they've stuck together. Me and Charlie, we want to be a team. Not only do I get on with Charlie, but I have a love for tag team wrestling. So I want to do single stuff as well. But seriously, I have an interest in being with my friend and getting to the top with him. Do you know what I mean?
See, Lucas, told you I have friends. It counts.
And there's with Dropkicks that I feel like could seriously use being in a tag team to their advantage due to the fact that we don't have many tag teams. Like, I'm not being funny. There's so many talented guys that we know that aren't doing anything at the moment. And honestly, if I was to put any two people together, I would put Mark Hendry and Benny Nitro together. Mark Hendry has been doing this for years, and he is fucking fantastic. I will say that with my chest. Seriously, this guy knows exactly what he's doing. I don't care what anyone says about him. Anyone can try to disrespect him. That guy knows what he's doing, and he is an absolutely sound bloke. He would literally fit into any company in the world. And Benny Nitro, right, I genuinely think people underestimate him because, like me, he's quite skinny, right? But genuinely, this guy is so talented. And I think if you put them two together, they've got quite similar styles. And I don't care what you call them, doesn't matter about the name. You just put them two together, and if they actually stayed a tag team for a serious amount of time, they could actually go places. I genuinely believe that. I feel like with Dropkicks, our problem is no one wants to actually be the tag team guy because they see it as a downgrade, like you said, Lucas. It's like when I used to play football when I was about 13, well, from about like 8 to 13, whatever, right? People would always want to be the striker because they saw that as the main thing. I played in defence because that's an equally as important thing. If you're bad in defence, you're not going to be good at attacking because you're just going to concede about 50 goals a game, right? If you need to have an even card. That's why you've got the likes of yourself, Daniels, being the hardcore wrestlers. You've got the likes of me and Charlie trying to build tag team wrestling up. You've got the types of Rohan Blake and Lewis Barrett being the singles guys. You need to have every single part of your show being equally as good as each other. That's why I want to be a tag team wrestler, because I want to raise that myself. And I feel like if people didn't see it as a downgrade, because it's not, there's plenty of seriously amazing tag teams. Like, if I'm not being funny, if someone turned around to any single person that's watching this video and went, do you want to face the Young Bucks? They would say yes. But if you turned around, Lucas, yourself, and went, I want to book you against the Brotherhood, they might turn around and go, oh, I don't want to be in a tag match. I'm not a tag guy. That's because you see us as a downgrade, as opposed to obviously facing the Young Bucks, one of the best tag teams in the world. Actual tag team wrestling isn't a downgrade. It's a fact of who you're facing. And quite frankly, I feel like scrap that and just get to a point where we're establishing ourselves and just build up this industry. That's how I see it personally. I know I'm probably waffling quite a lot, but that's how I see it.
No, there's a lot of good points in there.
No, I completely agree, yeah.
Essentially, it's just the time. Obviously, we haven't. Obviously, it's weird saying it. We're now bookended in the middle of another lockdown. But essentially, before pandemic era, like you was together for a tag team for what, like 6 months? Mm-hmm. I think 6 months. 8 months. Yeah, I think about 6 to 8 months. And Charlie got injured. Then we had pandemic. Then obviously we had
injury.
Yeah, then we had obviously an injury with Harry that happened, and then obviously we've gone back into lockdown again. But obviously, yeah,
literally within the past year, me and Harry have only had one tag match together.
Well, yeah, there was only one. What was there? There was only one normal. No, sorry. Yeah, one normal tag team match on the whole of Demolition, wasn't there? I think. Just you guys are saying there was a 6-man tag match.
Matches of all time.
But obviously, at the start of the year, Harry sort of had his singles match. Obviously, he had the Rumble, the Fatal 4-Way. Yeah, his match against like Vinny Daniels, like Turmoil.
Well, Turmoil. That's again. Turmoil. There was a tag match on that show, but there was 2 normal tag match. Obviously, bearing in mind this is obviously pandemic era thing. So obviously, there was 2 tag team matches the entirety of 2020. Which is obviously not where we want it to be, even with the tapings and the stuff around that. But it's definitely going forward is something which I think we should be like doing more of. So we'll move on to talk about like multi-person tag matches because they seem to be a massive thing. Like obviously WWE have had it for years with Survivor Series and stuff, but particularly now. There's lots of 6-man tags. Again, WWE I think they've done them really well in the past. Like when they have like the Shield and the Wyatt Family, Evolution, etc. Kind of, and them all going around. But now AEW, obviously, their tag team kind of company, it seems, and New Japan and stuff. Like they have a lot of the 4 versus 4 kind of matches, and even stables that consist of multiple tag teams, which to me is going to be confusing. But anyway, like. Do you think that this is something which is going to just keep getting bigger and bigger, and is something you'll be open to doing, like in the future, like if it was like the Brotherhood and the Rebellion teaming up as as a one-off or doing Survivor Series match, some stuff like that? Let's start with Charlie because obviously Harry just had a long kind of question, but start with Charlie this time.
In a weird way, factions work really well, in my opinion, because you've got all the different types of wrestlers. Like in a faction, right now, obviously, with me and Harry, we've sort of got the talker and we've got the wrestler. But if we sort of span out to a faction, we could have like the high flyer, the brawler, the guy who just takes the heat and takes my spot doing that because it is so much effort.
That's not
never happening.
Yeah, that's true. Even if we did, we'd still every match would be like Charlie taking the heat, and I'd have to agree to it. But there's so many different types of wrestling you could have in a faction, and it sort of just bounces off each other. Much like me and Harry did, obviously being talker and a wrestler, it just works. The same with the factions, but some that are thrown together as well, or you've got like you said previously, Lucas, the different tag teams with like what's going on in the Inner Circle right now in AEW. That just sort of will eventually get confusing, but it is definitely leading to what I believe might be an MJF versus Jericho match. I think it's just a weird thing, factions, as they can either work really, really well and be like a really known thing. Like obviously, like I said before, the Inner Circle in AEW is really known. You've got some of the best talents in AEW in that tag team as well. So if you're talking about AEW, Inner Circle will probably come up. But in terms of WWE, you don't have as many factions anymore. Obviously, the most known one was more than likely the Shield. But now...
I guess the Undisputed Era, Undisputed Era.
Yeah, Undisputed Era as well, but that's the main ones, and they're not even the main roster.
Hurt Business.
And if you go...
Yeah, there's some, but obviously like I'm talking like main up. Like, I heard this is a very good faction, but it's not sort of had that edge to it where it's been the hot topic. Obviously, yeah, I know the current Raw Tag Team Champions, I believe, are they?
Yeah, probably last year's
United States.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's sort of like tag team wrestling is not big enough for that faction to shine right now in WWE.
Yeah, I'd argue as well. Like that faction seems more of a single star faction. If that makes sense. Like,
yeah, it's sort of like you've got a tag team and you're a singles guy.
Because obviously Cedric and Shelton aren't really tag team wrestlers. Well, Shelton's tag team wrestler. He's starting tag team. Shelton's just fantastic. I mean, we can talk about Shelton all day. But,
he's amazing.
but they're not really a tag team. It's just the fact that obviously there's no tag teams in this.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like a thrown together faction that actually managed to work, being the Hurt Business. But with tag team, like multi tag team matches, I sort of hate the new format of it, and I've never have when it's sort of still 2 wrestlers in the ring at once, but you can have 3 or 4 tag teams. I don't know why, it's just always bugged me because I don't get the point of it in a way.
So what do you mean, sorry?
So say if it's like 3 tag teams, in a match, it will be like one person from 2 teams in the ring, but one tag team will have 2 people on the apron.
Oh, yeah. I know.
That's always sort of confused me. I think it should just be if you've got 3 tag teams, there's 3 wrestlers in the ring, 3 on the apron.
Yeah, it gets confusing with this stuff because they do, and sometimes they're elimination, sometimes they're not. It gets a bit baffling. Harry, you disagree with something Charlie said. I don't know what part it was.
Yeah,
I think it's like that.
I disagree with the Hurt Business thing, you said that since they're kind of led by a singles guy, that they've not given the opportunity to shine. I think I personally don't watch Raw or SmackDown. I actually just watch the YouTube clips because I don't have time for that. And let's be honest, half of the shit anyway. But quite frankly, I completely disagree. The Hurt Business is one of the best things I have seen for a long time in WWE. Not only are they tag title holders right now, so you can't really say that they're not having an emphasis on tag team wrestling, because only one member of their faction is actually a singles wrestler, because I consider MVP to be their manager, right? Only one person is a tag wrestler. You're saying they haven't been given the opportunity to shine because WWE doesn't like tag teams. I agree that there should be more emphasis on tag teams, right? But at the same time, you've got to appreciate the fact that Bobby Lashley looks like gold right now, right? Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, when they've been a team, have been very good together and had good matches, right? So how can you say they haven't had the opportunity to shine? I completely disagree with that. I feel like I know what you're trying to say, but I feel like that's the wrong example. I feel like the Hurt Business is actually a good example of how to treat tag teams, even though they're probably going to break up the tag team and have Cedric Alexander do his own thing. But genuinely, I feel that's a bad example, in my opinion, anyway.
In a way, though, I think Cedric Alexander and Hurt Business is a wasted talent. For like, as a single wrestler, I think he's WrestleMania. Was it him and Buddy Murphy at WrestleMania?
Yeah.
That is probably the best cruiserweight match I've ever seen.
But that statement you made there, Charlie, is that's a wasted talent. Why is it a wasted talent being in the tag team division? That, in my opinion, is what we need to get rid of. By him being in the tag team division is raising it. If you're saying he's too good for it and that he should be doing singles...
No, I don't mean as in he's too good. I mean he's better off as a singles wrestler. Yeah. So, like, there's some people...
In terms of WWE, what would he be doing? Like, because, I mean, he's not as over as... as himself, you'd argue he's not as over like a Ricochet, and Ricochet's not doing anything. So what would Cedric Alexander be doing if it wasn't in the Hurt Business? He'd probably just be the kind of guy that gets brought up just when Randy Orton needs someone to kick about a bit. You know,
exactly.
He's sort of guy who potentially in a couple of years' time, if built right, could be like a main title guy.
I agree.
Much like Ricochet. If they're built up right, they could join be a main title guy. Like Ricochet's match with AJ Styles recently on Raw was fucking amazing. I loved it.
Ricochet is literally a superhero. I know that's kind of superhero.
But like he actually is. The stuff he pulls off.
Really, I know I'm just buying into the gimmick and stuff. But if you look, I guarantee you 99.9% of people on this earth cannot do what he can do. And he dressed like a superhero. If you think about it as a business standpoint, right? They want to sell merchandise. What does a kid look up to? When I was a kid, I liked CM Punk and Kofi Kingston. Those are my favourite guys. Why? Because Kofi Kingston could do things that I could not dream of. This guy, Ricochet, is probably more talented than Kofi Kingston. I'm putting that out there.
Especially
he would be on top of his game. Like, seriously, this guy can do things that even other wrestlers in that company who will probably look down on him would think, fuck me, because Ricochet is insane. If he learned how to talk, he could quite possibly be the biggest star, because he will sell merchandise, figures. If they put him in a mask with Rey Mysterio, they should probably do that, because that will be merchandise. Like, seriously, the amount of stuff they could do with that guy is insane. He is so talented, it's mental.
Look, arguably as well, one of the best matches I've ever seen, just in all wrestling in general, was Ricochet versus Will Ospreay in New Japan. Because they done stuff you generally couldn't picture another wrestler doing. Like, obviously, Will Ospreay is probably the most famous high flyer from...
In the nice possible way, though, is that's not main event wrestling, though. Like, no one's going to pace it in the main event.
Right, but Lucas, you put Ricochet against Drew McIntyre. Is that not a main event match?
Yeah, but you can't really... I couldn't buy into a 20-minute, like a 10, 15-minute match.
But here's the thing, though. You would buy in. If it was Rey Mysterio versus Drew McIntyre, you would believe, potentially, that Rey Mysterio, because he is an established small guy, he could win the title, right? So, you have to Ricochet up to a point where he would be a legitimate challenger. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, Ricochet just can't talk. That's the problem, and he hasn't got that. I mean, Rey Mysterio, he's got the connection with the kids. He's got the Mexican heritage. I mean, he kind of capitalized his best friend dying. So you know, if Osprey wants to die, then Ricochet might get a bush like that.
Harry, if you want to take one for the team, I mean, we could bring this back. I'm still here.
He's retired.